Joan Baez has been at the vanguard of popular folk music for more than 20 years. Her career is actually a combination of two. She is a professional entertainer with more than a dozen best-selling albums to her credit and an outspoken political activist, a committed member of the 60s folk rock generation, which, if anything else, surely made itself heard on record and on the march. Joan Baez is a lady who has allowed her personal beliefs as well as her professional talents to be exposed, who wears her feelings on her sleeves, standing up for her personal beliefs no matter what the price, it seems. Joan Baez has just returned from Europe, where she performed at the Cathedral Notre Dame in Paris on Christmas Day, a concert that was beamed via satellite around the world live. We have Joan Baez here for what is a very rare network TV appearance. I welcome you to Tomorrow, Coast to Coast.
Thank you, Rona.
How did it feel to sing at Notre Dame? I understand that perhaps the only person who has ever been there has been somebody like the Pope.
It was the Pope, as a matter of fact, and myself. Well, it was something that I'd wanted to do for a long time, and it was outside in front of Notre Dame, and so the area was filled with people, and it was a beautiful night, and a series of miracles happened for us to deal with the French red tape, and the concert finally got done. It was Christmas Eve, actually. It was beautiful. Yeah.
I've been wanting to ask you this for a very, very long time.
Hit me, Rona.
It isn't that much of a hit. How did it all begin for Joan? How did you become so self-committed, and where did it stem from? Who was responsible for the motivation?
Okay, I don't know that those questions are ever really very answerable, but one of the things I think now at 40 that I can say is that when I'm healthiest, happiest, most adrenalated, and feel most at home is when I'm politically engaged or socially engaged, fighting. And one could be put down for that and say, she's not happy unless she has a cause. That's absolutely true. But it's like a football player saying, I'm not really happy and alive unless I'm on the field playing football. It's the same thing. I was either born into it, maybe it's in my genes, or then maybe it's the upbringing of my family. They were Quakers, and they did instill one thought in me very strongly, and that is that the most serious thing in this life is the sanctity of human life, and that there were nobody was any more special than anybody else. There were no border country lines, or we were not any better as Americans than the Swiss were, than the Latin Americans were, and so on. So I think that's been to my benefit.
Did you feel that way at a very early age, or can you remember actually the very first incident or the very first time that you became aware of what your parents really had told you?
Oh, I think that came through before I could verbalize it very well. I remember at age 10 thinking about the world, and I pictured it in my mind, and I pictured all these little dots all over it, and those were all people. And I knew perfectly well, simply because the conversation in my household, that 2/3 of those dots were hungry, didn't go to bed in a comfortable place at night, didn't have the care of both parents, and so on. And I, for some reason or another, and that's the mystery, I don't know why, but that concerned me very much.
Well, people have often said, or have often assumed, that women especially, when they have become politically motivated, become activists, that usually a man has been responsible, that it is the man who has given the woman the words, the thoughts, and the feelings, and in order to please him, you sort of go along. Was there a man in your life who was responsible for getting you to become an activist?
Well, seeing as it started when I was 14, it must have been my dad, but the innate pacifist in our household is probably more my mother. So I would really credit to both of them. And no, at one point in my life when I got married, I teamed up with a man who shared my beliefs, certainly at the time. I don't think he does to any great degree anymore, but and so we influenced each other. But no, it was not a man. There was a man who taught me radical nonviolence in the sense that he introduced me to Mahatma Gandhi, Lao Tzu, Tolstoy, and people who influenced my thinking and made it possible for me to verbalize what nonviolence meant, what fighting meant, that there was a way to really fight and put my adrenaline into action without using the archaic methods of guns and the stuff that's going to really bring the human race to a dead halt.
Who was that?
That was a man named Ira Sandpearl, and I met him when I was 16 in Quaker meeting. And he knew that teenagers hated Quaker meeting, where you have to sit and be quiet and your tummy grumbles and the rest of it. So he would take us out after 20 minutes, and the teenagers would sit around and we would just talk. And it was really the first time. That had never happened in public school for me, to have leisure time to discuss things that were on our mind, from sex to God to you name it, everything. We were free to really talk, and then had somebody who was intelligent and could guide us, feed us with new ideas.
Was he in any way, did he become a personal part of your life? Was he a man that you became personally involved with?
Well, personally involved was not sexually, if that's your question, but we traveled together, worked together, got arrested together, did things together for about 22 years. And so I was terribly close to this man. And of course, all the women he was ever with assumed that we had something going beyond what we did and would all raise hell about it. And I think probably in my case that it wouldn't have been that close and that good for me if we'd mixed the two.
One of the things that really comes to mind, I think for a lot of people out there, they think of Joan Baez, and in many ways they think of it almost in a negative term. You've been beaten up by the old left, the new left, to use the old funny line, whatever left's over, and everything else. Joan, do you ever go home and you cry? Do you ever say, I'm never getting up again, I'm never going to do this again? Or does it make you stronger, and do you feel more motivated than ever before when you're attacked that way?
I've gotten clobbered sometimes where I have reached the hotel room before I burst into tears, but that usually, our personal depressions that all of us have, and all of us have them, are usually very personal. And usually politically, I know where I am and what I'm doing, and I'm ready for the onslaught. If the onslaught is overwhelming, which occasionally it is, then yeah, I get sick and I go to bed and I cope with it for a few days. But one thing I have learned, or one thing I may have known without having to learn it, and I don't know how that happened, but it's a blessing, is I don't expect very much. I think one of the things about, when we kid about spring vacation revolutionaries, kids who decide suddenly they're going to get political, they're going to go out and they're going to stop the war, and in 3 weeks the war's still going on, and they're just ticked off. What happened? They were out there. What happened? And the things I want to see, I probably won't see in my lifetime.
Were your parents cold?
No.
Were they warm?
To me?
Yes.
To me?
I want to know where you built up that kind of steely feelings inside that you could cope with all of this, and you don't crack up and you don't say, I'm going to quit.
No, but it has to do with what I was saying, that if I had illusions about what I'm going to meet out there, then I'd get hurt every time I open my mouth. Because every time I open my mouth, somebody's going to be angry at what I say. Because basically my beliefs are anti-nationalistic, that if you're for sanctity of life, you have to be for sanctity of all life. And that really means that Jesus said, love thine enemy. Mahatma Gandhi said, we have no enemy. That's a very revolutionary thing to say, and people don't want to hear that. We want to have our selected enemies so we can be self-righteous, so we can build up our armaments and be ready to blow away who we think our enemy is. And I really think that that's going to, I understand to some degree the evil, stupid, reactionary part of human nature. And when you kind of understand it and accept that we all have it, then you don't get so battered every time it lands on your head.
An observation, Joan, was made to me today, and I think it was a rather interesting one. I hadn't thought of it myself, that when people who are sort of liberal-minded are in office, that the liberal-minded people who represent that cause are usually shut up, and vice versa. Now that we're entering into what we consider a right-wing period, here I am interviewing you. How do you really explain this sort of phenomena that happens?
You mean that you're interviewing?
No, not necessarily. That the fact is that I think we want to hear a little bit of the voice from the left.
Well, I want to make it perfectly clear, to coin an old phrase, that I'm not from the left. I never was from the left, and it was impossible to make that clear in the 60s because I worked with the left. I really think that what I want to try and do with, say, our small group Humanitas, which is a human rights group, you can't be on the left or the right if you want to see with both eyes. If you want to say Vietnam has more political prisoners than any other country in the world right now, and America takes part and parcel of torturing people in Latin America, then you have to not really be choosing on those sides.
That's true, because you were condemned, by...
For both.
For both, certainly by Jane Fonda and others when you took out those ads in the newspapers condemning...
We somehow have to devise a way for ourselves to junk those ideologies. It's going to be very difficult the next 4 years. No, I'm not interested in confrontation politics right like that with this administration, but I must say it scares the hell out of me how they've started out, talking about armaments, 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 and the whole mentality of cutting off welfare, cutting off all things for the little people. You know, and there are a lot of very slick talkers who want to make it look as though that's not what's happening. That's what's happening. And I think that it's those armaments that are really going to hold the entire world hostage, including you and me and everybody sitting around in this studio.
I'm sorry I don't have time to really get into that aspect of it, and I hope we can come back and do something else. But in the 80s, you're involved in a brand new project. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, I'm working on an album. I'm writing a song that's kind of developing into an album concept called Children of the 80s, and it came out of the fact that I discovered that a lot of young children come to my concerts. And I want to find out about them and understand them, and probably at some point try and recruit some of them. But in trying to understand them, I've gotten lots of letters, and
you've written some new songs, right?
And I've written a couple of songs. And
could you do one for me?
I'll sing you two verses from the song,
okay,
from the base of the song, and one verse is about the kids who are still kind of jealous that they didn't live in the 60s, and another verse is about a minority of young people who are very concerned about world affairs and want to become involved.
I think that's the way you'd like it.
That's correct. We like the music of the 60s. We think that era must have been nifty. The Rolling Stones, the Beatles, and the Doors. Flower Children, Woodstock, and the war. The dirty scandals cover up some more. Oh, but it's getting harder to deceive us. We don't care if Dylan's gone to Jesus. Jimi Hendrix is playing on. We know Janis Joplin was the rose, and we also know what she put up her nose, and the other stuff went in her arm. Don't be alarmed, we are the children of the 80s. Haven't we grown? We're tender as a lotus, and we're tougher than stone. And the age of our innocence is somewhere in the garden. Some of us may offer a surprise. Recently, have you looked in our eyes? Maybe we're your conscience in disguise. We're well informed and we are wise. Please stop telling us lies. We know Afghanistan's invaded. We know Bolivia's dictated. We know America's inflated. And though we do not move in masses, we have lit our candles from your ashes, and our lives have just begun. We are the warriors of the sun, the golden boys and the golden girls for a better world. We are the children of the 80s. Haven't we grown? We're tender as a lotus, and we're tougher than stone. And the age of our innocence is somewhere in the garden.
Ms. Joan Baez, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rona.